Libra. Don't chase after this person. Let them come to you. Libra. There's something nobody tells you about not chasing after someone. It's not about willpower. It's not about pride. And it's definitely not about playing any games. There's something much deeper happening when Libra stops, an understanding that will change how you see not only your relationships, but yourself. Because if you've come this far, thinking this content is going to teach you a technique, prepare for a surprise. Libra learns early on that showing too much pushes people away. This lesson comes in different ways for everyone. Sometimes it's a rejection that hurts more than it should. Sometimes it's the silence of someone who used to talk a lot. Sometimes it's just a change in their gaze. And Libra, with all that sensitivity, picks it up before any words are spoken. And from that moment on, a silent calibration process begins. Libra starts to learn how much of themselves they can show without scaring anyone away. How much enthusiasm is allowed before it seems like anxiety. How much interest is safe before it seems like neediness. It sounds like wisdom, doesn't it? It sounds like emotional maturity. And in part, it is. But there's a layer underneath that most people never get to see. What Libra calls restraint is sometimes fear disguised as elegance. And this isn't criticism, it's recognition. Because there's a huge difference between the Libra, who doesn't chase after things because they're rooted in themselves, and the Libra who doesn't chase after things because they've learned that chasing hurts. One acts from a place of wholeness, the other acts from a place of scars. And for a long time, no one could tell the two apart, not even Libra. Because on the outside, their behavior seems the same, the posture, the calmness, the air of someone who doesn't need anything. But on the inside, the experiences are completely different. A centered Libra doesn't chase after someone because they are present, whole, at peace with their own desires. The other is holding back. They are calculating. They have their ear to the ground, trying to hear the other's footsteps approaching. And it is precisely this difference that determines what happens next, because the field that Libra emits when it is truly present is different from the field it emits when it is holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice. Think about it. Have you ever walked into a room and sensed that someone needed you even before they opened their mouth? That vague, almost imperceptible feeling that there's a need in the air? That's how it works. We transmit what we feel, even when we're doing nothing, even in silence, even completely still. Libra is a Venus-ruled sign. It's the sign of attraction, beauty, harmony, and interpersonal magnetism. And there's a cruel irony here. The most naturally magnetic sign of the zodiac is also one of the most vulnerable to persecution. Why? Because Libra doesn't just feel its own attraction, it feels the attraction of the other. It reads the surrounding field with almost frightening precision. And when that field begins to cool, when the other's interest seems to wane, something in Libra awakens. An ancient alarm, a pattern that says you are losing your balance, and the instinctive response is to move towards the other, adjust, soften, get closer, without realizing that it is precisely this movement that tilts the scale in the wrong direction. Imagine a sensitive scale, one of those laboratory scales that oscillates with the breeze. Libra senses the other's imbalance before its own, and the instinctive response is to compensate, to move to the opposite side to restore symmetry. But there's one question that nobody asks after this movement. What do you do with the silence while... Wait, what? That question has an answer that Libra rarely allows itself to give. Honestly, it was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. It arrived at a time when I was exactly in that place, stuck, not running, but without peace. Because stopping physically doesn't mean the mind stops. And this book touches exactly on that wound, what Libra does with itself in the interval between desire and response. how it learns to inhabit silence without transforming it into anxiety, how it discovers that the balance it so desperately seeks in others can only be found first within itself. You are in that exact moment right now, still processing what you heard, still feeling the discomfort of recognizing a pattern that is your own. This discomfort is precious. It is the sign that something real has been touched. And it is precisely now, while this is still alive within you, that it makes sense to act, not tomorrow when the clarity cools. Now, while the question still pulsates. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And you, when you're waiting for someone to come to you, what happens to your mind in that silence? Tell us in the comments. But to understand why this movement happens, we need to go back a little, go back to something that Libra has carried from the beginning. Libra is the sign of the scales, and everyone knows that. But what few people realize is that Libra's scales aren't balanced. They oscillate constantly. And it's not because Libra is indecisive or unstable, it's because they are too sensitive to the weight of what's around them. Imagine a laboratory balance, one of those precision scales, with its pans suspended by very thin wires. To weigh accurately, it needs to be in an environment free from drafts, vibrations, and interference. Place it in the middle of a busy corridor, and it oscillates constantly. Not because it's broken, but because it's responding to the environment with impressive accuracy. Libra is like that. They read the atmosphere with a precision that few signs possess. They sense the change in mood before the word is spoken. They perceive the tension before the conflict. They sense the cooling off before the silence. And they respond to all of this instinctively, trying to compensate, balance, harmonize. The problem is that when you're always compensating for the other person's weight, you lose touch with your own weight, with what you really want, with what you really feel. Because your attention is focused on the external, on maintaining the balance of the relationship, and not on the internal, on knowing what you genuinely need. And Libra does this with such mastery that sometimes she herself doesn't realize she's doing it. She looks inward and finds the reflection of the other, what the other needed from her that she became, what the relationship demanded she be. Not a conscious betrayal, an adaptation so natural that it seems like identity, but it isn't. And then a moment arrives, usually when the relationship cools, when the person withdraws, when the balance that Libra has worked so hard to maintain begins to falter, when she realizes she's alone with herself and doesn't know exactly who she'll meet again. This is the scariest moment for Libra, and it's also the most important moment, because it is in this void that the real question arises. And me, what do I want? But before arriving at that answer, there's another layer. There's something about Libra that's so deep, so inherent to the sign, that she rarely manages to see it from the outside. Libra is the most naturally magnetic sign of the zodiac, not by accident, by nature. Venus, which governs Libra, is the force of attraction in the symbolic universe of astrology, not the force that conquers, the force that attracts. That makes things naturally gravitate in its direction. And here's the paradox that no popular astrology book explains properly. Libra's magnetism is involuntary. It's not a skill it wields, it's a quality it emanates, like a gravitational field, like moonlight. But when Libra tries to use that magnetism, when it becomes conscious, calculated, strategic, it disappears. Because what made that field powerful was precisely the absence of effort. It was naturalness. It was the fact that Libra was simply being itself without trying to be irresistible. The moon doesn't try to illuminate, it simply exists. And light happens as a consequence of existence, not as a result of effort. Libras who understand this completely change their stance. It's no longer about what to do or not to do. It's about who to be. But then that silence returns. And what does Libra do with it? Because you can understand all of this intellectually, and yet the moment the weight stretches on and the other person seems not to be coming closer, you feel that old alarm waking up. That voice that says, do something, move, act, prove that you exist. And Libra needs to learn to stay with that voice without immediately obeying it. You need to learn to recognize what I'm feeling now isn't the reality of the situation. It's the echo of an old pattern. It's the scar that still burns when the temperature changes. And this distinction between the old standard and the present moment is where everything begins to change. There is a type of silence that seems tranquil, but is actually an internal battlefield. It is the silence of Libra in waiting. On the outside, serenity, that air of someone unfazed. On the inside, a marathon of interpretations. What did he mean by that message? Why did she take so long to reply? Did I say something wrong? Did I do too little? Did I do too much? Libra analyzes. Libra ponders. Libra weighs every sign, every pause, every word that came and every word that didn't. It's not standing still, it's working frantically within itself while outwardly it seems like it's doing nothing. And here's the problem that nobody talks about. This inner workings have a frequency, and that frequency is transmitted. Imagine a radio transmitter turned on, but with no sound coming from the speakers, no voice, no music, but there's a signal. And whoever has the right receiver picks it up. They can't name what they're picking up, but they feel it. A kind of weight in the air, an undeclared need, an urgency that wasn't spoken aloud, but it's there. This is how Libra's silent anxiety reaches the other person, not through words, not through actions, but through the air she emits while waiting. And the other person backs away, not because Libra did anything wrong, but because the body knows how to recognize pressure before the mind understands where it's coming from. And Libra, on the other hand, doesn't understand. She did nothing. She waited, she held back, she was restrained. Why didn't it work? Because the problem was never Libra's behavior. It was Libra's internal state while it was performing that behavior. And this is where astrology meets psychology in a disturbingly precise way. Libra doesn't just want the person. Libra wants what that person's presence confirms about themselves. They want the reflection. They want proof that they are desirable, that they are enough, that they are good enough to be chosen. This isn't weakness. This is human. But for Libra, it's especially intense because Libra is ruled by Venus, the planet of love, beauty, and worth. And deep down, the question Libra always asks isn't, does this person like me? The real question is, am I valuable enough to be loved? And when the answer is delayed, when the person doesn't come, when the other person's silence extends beyond what is comfortable, that old question awakens, and with it comes the impulse to do something to prove that yes, it's worthwhile, that it's deserving. But chasing after someone doesn't answer that question. It only amplifies it, because the moment Libra runs, she confirms to herself what she feared, that without effort, without movement, without initiative, she wouldn't be magnetic enough for someone to come along, and then the cycle closes in on itself. This realization you just had, that Libra confuses connection with approval, is no small thing. When you truly understand this, it changes how you relate to everything, to people, to work, to your own image. The digital book, the divine path that guides your zodiac, sign to a life of purpose, addresses exactly this invisible layer of Libra, the confusion between being loved and being approved, and shows how to find your own center without needing external validation. It's the kind of book that makes you think, why didn't anyone tell me this before? The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But there's an even more subtle consequence to this, one that Libra rarely manages to name. When she learns that over-demonstrating pushes people away, she doesn't just hold back the demonstration, she holds back the desire, the authentic version of interest, the genuine enthusiasm that exists before any calculation, and she begins to construct a curated version of herself to present to the other person, polished, balanced, almost flawless, a version that never seems to want too much, that never shows urgency, that always maintains that serene and slightly distant tone. The problem is that this version isn't real, and what isn't real doesn't truly connect. Imagine a flower that closes its petals to avoid being picked. It thinks it's protecting itself, but the gardener passes by, sees nothing interesting, and moves on. Not because the flower isn't beautiful, but because closed, it doesn't reveal what it is. Libra, when closed, seems safe, but it doesn't seem available. And for someone seeking real connection, being unavailable is the same as not being there. So there's a point, a very specific point, that Libra rarely finds. A place between frantically rushing around and disappearing completely behind a facade of indifference. A place where interest is real, but not urgent. Where presence is genuine, but not dependent. Where Libra is exactly who she is, unedited, uncontained, unperformed. Finding that point isn't a technique. It's an inner achievement. And to get there, Libra first needs to understand why it went to the opposite extreme. Why protection became armor. Because there's a moment at some point in almost every Libra's past when showing desire brought pain, when enthusiasm was misinterpreted, when openness was exploited in a way that hurt. And Libra, who is naturally sensitive to their environment, remember, registered all of that, stored it, and created an internal rule. Don't show so much, don't expose yourself so much, don't be so obvious. And this rule, which was created to protect, ended up imprisoning. Because now it's no longer a conscious rule, it's a reflex. Libra doesn't decide to contain, it simply contains, before realizing, before choosing, before evaluating whether this is the right response for this moment. And then she wonders why the connection always seems so difficult to build. And here is the answer that Libra spends its whole life searching for outside of itself. The center. Not the center as a perfect balance between two extremes. Not the absence of desire or feeling. The center as an internal state, a kind of intrinsic gravity that doesn't depend on external confirmation to exist. When Libra is at this center, something completely changes in the field it emits. It stops transmitting need. It stops transmitting urgency. And what begins to appear in its place is something much more powerful, real presence. And the presence, real, is irresistible. Return to the image of the moon. The moon doesn't move toward the sun. It doesn't accelerate when the earth cools. It doesn't change its trajectory to ensure it continues to illuminate. It simply exists, in the right place, at the right angle, with its natural luminosity. And because it exists in this way, it illuminates everything, effortlessly, without strategy, without chasing. This is not passivity. The moon is a celestial body with mass, gravity, and influence. Earth's tides respond to the moon. Nights are shaped by the moon, not because the moon asked for it, but because it simply is what it is. Libras with this kind of presence attract because they exist, not because they tried. And then comes the question that seems simple but isn't. How does Libra get there? How does it find that center after a lifetime of learning to move towards others, to calibrate, to adjust, to be what seems necessary to be at that moment? The answer isn't immediate, and it's not easy, but it begins with a recognition. As long as Libra is seeking approval, it will be deactivating its own magnetism. And as long as it doesn't become the center of its own gravity, there is no posture, no technique, no restraint that can reproduce the field it would naturally have if it were whole. Libra's job is not to learn not to run, it's to learn not to need to run. And that difference between not running because you decided not to run and not running because it's so ingrained in you that there's simply no impulse to run is the distance between a strategy and a transformation. There's a turning point that Libra rarely names, the moment when it stops trying to exert magnetism and simply becomes the field. This is what the digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, calls real presence, not the performance of calm, but the genuine state of someone so whole within themselves that they don't need anyone to confirm it. This content is rare, it's not motivation, it's inner architecture, and it could be taken down at any moment. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. So when someone tells you, don't chase after it, they're saying something true, but incomplete. Because the problem isn't the act of chasing. The problem is what makes you feel like you need to chase. Libra understands this and asks, how do I get this person to come to me? And begins to ask something much more interesting. What happens to me when I am so present within myself that I don't need anyone to come and complete me? This question changes everything. Because when Libra is whole, truly whole, not pretending to be whole, it doesn't need the other person to come. But the other person does come, not because they've been conquered, but because it's become difficult to resist the presence of someone who knows exactly what they are. The moon doesn't chase, it doesn't run, it doesn't calculate. It simply exists at the highest point in the sky, illuminating everything below, without asking permission, without checking if the reflection is pleasing. And the whole world is watching her. Let them come to you, not as a strategy, as a natural consequence of you having returned to yourself. This is the deepest beauty of Libra. When she stops seeking balance outside herself and begins to be the balance, she not only finds the right person, she finds herself.